Hi guys, welcome back to FabriKated Quilts with So Steady's Facebook Live on Sunday. We've got a few people that are on, so we're going to just let the number bump up a little bit, and then if you can go ahead and let me know that you're here with a wave or a hello. If the sound is good, that's also important, and if you can see, that's great to know as well. Hi, Joanne from Mississippi. Hi, Susan Digman. Nice to talk to you. Jackson, Missouri. My husband is a Missouri boy. Hello. Hi, Linda Martindale. You're going to keep me straight today, I know. Hi, Carol. So many great, fabulous people that I recognize. Peggy Anderson. I lived in Kansas, too. We have such a great country with so many amazing places all over. So it's great to see so many people from different places. Hi, Nan from Sweden. Hi, Susan Tapp. All right, so we have a good number of people now, so I think we'll get started. So about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I published a question on my ruler work support group asking people what they were interested in, so that I could tailor my educational content for what people want rather than just magically guessing. And so we did one of those lessons. The number one thing that people were interested in was how to do edge to edge. And that is my most popular educational video of all time. It tops 25,000 views. So if you have not seen that, it's out there on the So Steady page, and it's also on my ruler work support group, so you can find it pretty readily. And it does showcase several different templates. So we've done that number one most important thing. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how to design. Actually, Donna McCauley's on here. Donna, this is for you. Donna McCauley is a fabulous educator, and she's also a designer of templates, many really beautiful products, and she asked me the other day to talk about thread in conjunction with my education content. So I'm going to do that. So Donna, that's for you. And so let's get started. So the first thing I want to mention really quickly is this fantastic new product, which I've already scratched it because I was dumb, but it's fantastic. I have polished it, and I want to show you how awesome it is. So there's 3 of these little squares just for eye candy color. Watch this. Bam! Pretty fantastic. So nice and slippery. It works really, really well. And notice that it just has an opening big enough for the foot. And then it's got no markings because it's called our ruler work glider. So the concept is you're not going to be sewing here. You're just using it for your ruler work. So let's talk about thread. Now I'm already threaded up, but I want to talk about thread because I get asked that so much. So we want to make sure that you know what you have the choice of. And the choices that you have today are better than ever before. They're amazing. Okay, so I have a little collection, and this is kind of the colorway of what we're working on. And what I'll do is I've got a little piece of black fabric right here, and we're gonna lay that thread right on top of that so you can see it really well. All right, so our first one, this is a polyester and it's 40 weight, and this is one of my absolute favorites. This is Isacord, and Isacord or any 40 weight poly from the good brands like Superior Threads, Floriani, anything like that, people will say, oh, that's embroidery thread. Well, it doesn't say that on the top. It just says thread, and it says the weight. So I'm going to call it quilting thread, and I use it a lot, and I think it's fantastic. So here is that thread. So we'll just lay it out. Now this one is, let's see, this is Madeira, and it's also polyester 40 weight, but it's variegated. So we'll lay that one out, and you can see pretty close. Let's see if we can get you guys in there a little bit. So they look, you know, pretty much the same. They are the same weight. So let's go vastly different. So this is Kimono Silk, and this is by Superior brand. And then this thread is super fine. Look at how fine that is, right? So if we put it next to one of these guys right here, can you see the difference there? I mean, this one almost disappears. That 40 weight definitely has a lot of presence, and it's gonna, really show up, whereas this really thin thread can virtually disappear. It just hides really, really well. So if I'm doing something where I want to micro quilt and I have a lot of stitching in a really small area and I don't want the thread to build up, that is where this type of thread is really, really, really great, because I can sew a circle 4 or 5 times and you won't even know that it's 4 or 5 times. That type of thread, it's 100 weight. And I do like how it performs. It's very flexible, and you can use a really, really small needle with a thread like this, like a 65 or a 70. And the benefit to using that really, really tiny needle is then you get a really tiny needle hole. Okay, but if this is the majority of your quilting, this type of thread is very expensive, and it's not going to be something that really has a lot of presence, so I wouldn't use that for my majority. I use that sort of for coloring in the lines. Okay, now something that's kind of in the middle. This is, let's see if I can open it here. Sorry guys. It's very secure. So this one is bottom line, and this is 60 weight. So we'll just stick it back there. We'll put it right in the middle. So we have 40, both of these, 60, and that's 100. And then we have this one right here is kind of in the middle, and this one's variegated, so you can see, obviously. And this is 50 weight. So that number, as the number goes higher, you're going to get a finer thread. So let me see if we can line them up. So 40 weight, and then this one is the 60 right here, and this is 50, and that's 100. And the other threads that I use is an 80 weight. I like Deco Bob. It's great for piecing, and it is a very lightweight thread, and it comes in a lot of colors. So whenever you're doing something that you need that something fine, but you need the right color, Deco Bob is something that you can use for that, and that's a wonderful thread. So when people say, oh, what's your favorite brand? What am I going to tell you? Whatever works, whatever I want. I do buy good quality threads, all the good brands that you hear about, Aurifil, Madeira, Isacord, Floriani, Persentia, Metler, all of those are great brands. The threads that we have anymore are so great. So Carol, maybe you missed it, but this right here, this is silk thread right here. And you can see the drape on it is just like silk. It's really flexible. It's not wiry at all. So it's really great. So let me show you this other 100 weight. Where'd he go? He's hiding. So this is also 100 weight. This is Invisifil. And you can see that this is a little bit like more wiry than the silk. It kind of has its own little thing. See how it curls right there because it's run on the spool? So this is going to have a little bit more memory. Whereas if you look at the silk and you just let it drape down, notice how the silk barely has a curve at all. It'll just lay down. So you're not going to get as much spin on the silk like you will on some of the Wonderfill. And so something else that's really, really important with the right thread is making sure that you have your thread put on the correct way. So your manual should tell you if the thread comes off the bottom or the top or whatever, but you have to have the right tools. Okay, so this is the small spool cap. This is the large one. I'm going to show you one more, and it's actually on my machine right now. This one is called the special spool cap, and this one is when you're using a spool like this and you have it on your spool pin and it's laden down like this. This cap will go in there like that and hold the spool on there. And I want to tell you, I didn't know that for like 20 years. I saw it at a show with an educator, And I thought, oh my God, I've been putting this off of the machine on a separate spool stand, and I've had this little pin for years and never ever known that that's what it was for. So I never used it, and it works awesome. So if you have this for your machine, make sure you keep this little guy handy because he's gold right there, right? And then if I was gonna sew on that like this, see what would happen here is the thread is gonna get stuck in between those two pieces. So that's why these are not a good fit. But if I have my little spool right here, you know, this is the right fit. You want to try to get these as close in size as you can, right? And then something like this, you can put that little guy in there like that. And if he still is not stable, because some of these have a little bit different diameter, it depends. You want them not to rock on the spool pin. Then you can use this upright with something that goes up over the top of your machine and let this stand on the base like that one. So there's lots of choices, but thread makes a big difference. Okay, it makes a huge difference. So we're gonna just show you real quick. So if you guys were watching last week, I did the cross hatching video, and I had 2 different threads that I was using for that. So I'm going to showcase really quickly the 2 threads on the front and the back and how much thread can change the visual. So let's get all these off. So what I'm using today, what we're going to sew with is actually this same thread. I've already got a cone on there, and I'm using a matching bobbin. So 40 weight in the top and 40 weight in the bobbin. All right, and so people were like, oh, what should I buy? If you like a spool of thread, if you like the color or you like the look or you think it's going to work for your project, buy a spool. Try it. If you don't like it, don't buy any more. If you do like it, then try another color. Make sure that you're matching your needle. Okay, so the thread that I have in right now is a 40 weight thread, and my needle is a 90-14 top stitch needle. So I highly recommend either a top stitch needle or a quilting needle when you're working with our ruler work system. I think that that protects the thread because the groove that is right in here, the thread needs to fit in it so that every time the needle goes down, the fabric is abrading that thread. So if the thread is riding in the groove, then the needle is protecting that thread from abrasion. If you have a really fat thread, like this one, 40, and you maybe have an 80 weight needle, an 80 needle, maybe the thread will ride on top of the groove and then it will shred because it doesn't fit in there, it's not being protected. So you definitely want to match up the application of your needle, what type, if you're applique, if you're quilting, you always want to make sure that these match. And then you want the needle to be the correct size. And one thing else, many manufacturers will tell you. So I'll show you an example right here. So if you look, this one says superior threads, bottom line, 60 weight. And then sometimes on these, they'll have a little note that'll say, you know, this needle or that needle. Not all manufacturers will have that, but some of them do. And that's really helpful for you to know which one you need to use. Okay. All right. So let me show you that sample. We'll take this black off of here and we'll get that cross hatching sample. All right, here we go. So if you guys didn't see this last week, we did this fun cross hatching, and you can see there's still a lot of markings on here. I haven't taken them off yet. And why I have done that is I've got some ideas, so I don't want to erase my thought process. So these are like some ideas to put different little fills in different areas like that. Now let's lift this up and get this really close to you so you can see really good. We'll use this area. Okay, so this is the Madeira variegated polyester 40 weight thread. Okay, so you can see really close. So that thread has dramatic presence. It really, really shows. It's not in the background, it's the visual impact. And especially because it's variegated, it really has a dynamite look. It draws your eye right into it. Now that's great for this piece because there's no piecing. So we want the eye to go right to the quilting because the quilting is the star. If you had piecing in here and this was just the secondary accent to your piecing, let's flip this over and show you the other side. Okay, so there, that is a matching lighter weight thread. Okay, so we'll kind of get you in there. See that? So that's a 50 weight, and that is a matching thread. And you can see this kind of just blends in. It's still a fairly notable thread. It's not really skinny, but you can really see that when you have that matching thread, the quilting kind of settles down and it's a little bit of a background look to it. It's not as much of the prominence when you have a variegated thread. Now I'm going to give one more little comment on variegated thread. Okay, so I'm working on a quilt right now, and it's got a variegated thread and a really dark thread on the back, and the variegated thread has yellow, bright yellow segments. It's almost impossible to hide that yellow from the back. Even as experienced with tension as I am, it's really difficult. I've used several different needles, I've adjusted the tension, I've played with it a ton, and it's really hard. So if you're a beginner, I generally do not recommend that you start with variegated thread. It's hard. It's a little bit harder. It's awesome. It looks amazing, but maybe it's not where you want to start when you first are working with it. You know, use the matching threads and you'll be a lot more comfortable and not worry about so many things. You can hide better with the matching thread. Let's talk about one other thing. People ask me all the time, do you use the same thread in the bottom, in the bobbin, and in the top? Often I do not. It depends. Especially if the quilt is got a textured back and the fabric is going to hide the thread on the back. I'm not going to use my best, most highlighting thread on the back because nobody's going to see it. So I may just use some really lightweight 80 weight bobbin that's kind of some neutral color. These are pretty inexpensive compared to the spools of thread, and they're ready to go, so I can just pop them in there, especially if I need a bunch of them. And so that might be easier. So Carol's question, she asked me, do you not try to match the bobbin thread with your backing on a full-size quilt? Only if I want to. Only if I need to. If the backing is, say, white, you know, I might try to do that because I know that the quilting will show. So then I make other choices. So here, obviously, we did not a matching thread, you can tell. Let me show you a matching thread. Okay, this is white, right? So this thread is matching the color on the top. And then what you get here is, since this has a little bit of blue, this can be beautifully its own piece of art on the back of the quilt. If you have a white backing like this, then the whole quilting on the back just looks like a piece of artwork. So Di Werner just asks, can you use pre-wound? So I have a Janome 9450. Most domestic machines have a certain class of bobbin. The most common are class 15 and L style, okay? And so most of those bobbins are available in a pre-wound. This is a class 15, you can see right on the top, and then they have the L style bobbin. And then, so if you do want to use pre-wounds, they're pretty much widely available for most machines. You just need to make sure that your bobbin matches your machine. Some machines will have an adapter for their bobbin that can use, like, an L shape is shorter. So some machines will have a little peg that the bobbin can sit on if you're using an L-shaped bobbin, and then you can use it in a class 15. If you don't know the answer to that, your local quilt shop is the place to give you answers for that, and potentially even buy those pre-wounds that you might want. And these come in all different colors, lots of colors, not just neutrals, but every color of the rainbow. Okay, so today we're going to talk about quilting-wise, fun and fancy. So let me share really quickly. This is the Fun and Fancy collection, and it's 5 different templates. And I know a lot of you maybe have seen them, but I'll just put them out here real quick so we can show you what we're going to do with them. So there's actually 6 pieces in here, even though it says 5 piece, because these are actually 2 different pieces that have different diameter. And then my favorite, I love back to back, so always have those in almost everything I do. This is Circles on Quilts 21. This is the simple oval, 3 inches from top to bottom by 1.5 across the middle. And then this one is close size, but not the same size. This is the back-to-back 3-inch for the curve -2, number 2. And then this one is Spinifex number 8. And then right here, this is the 1 inch between the lines circle. So I have a couple people asking questions like, will this work in my machine? Will that work in my machine? So there's thousands of machines out there. So if you're able to answer that person, if you have that knowledge or that machine and you've used something, that'd be great if you want to help them out. I don't know the answer. And again, your local quilt shop is your source for information for that type of thing. So what we're going to do today is the number 2 question that I had on what people want as far as their class and their education is, how do we design quilting with the templates working together? So I have a few pieces that we're going to quilt, and we're going to show some decision-making process and some ideas about why you might want to choose something versus something else. And we're going to basically be using this grouping right here of templates. Now, the same considerations will apply to different blocks, but you could use different templates. Not that you have to use mine, but this is just an opportunity for you to see how these pieces can work together. And in case you have not seen the book, here is my book. So the book has 32 base designs, and it has over 100 different designs in there. And then here are just some of the different blocks that you can see and how they're quilted with the Fun and Fancy collection. So let's move these and we'll get started. So I am using my ruler rack today, so hopefully we will be organized. You guys know half the time I set something down and then I can't find it, so. Oh, that's my creative mind, right? That's what I keep telling myself. It feels better than I'm dumb and I can't remember. Okay, so let's get started. Let me grab our first one. All right, so this is a scrappy piece that I had left over from when I was working with my Fun and Fancy collection. So I did a sampler quilt, and this was absolutely 100% the wrong size for the center, so I just have it left over. So right here, there's an obvious frame right here that needs to be filled. Since there's no piecing, we have to have something in here that catches the eye. So how do we decide? So this is going to be quilting focused. So I need some kind of motif that is going to be pretty elaborate or fill this up pretty significantly. So I don't want to just put like, some straight lines or whatever. It has to have some visual interest. So that's the decision-making process for this right here. So I'm going to go ahead and put my crosshair square on here, and I'm going to use the 8-point crosshair square. Now, the size of this block right here is 6 inches, okay? And I'm going to use the Circles on Quilts in this space. And this typically sews out at 7.5 inches, right? So how can that fit in this 6-inch box? Okay, I'm going to do magic. I'm going to show you in just a second. Let's go ahead and we'll mark the center real quick. So you know that we have the little 6-inch marker here. So I'm going to get that nicely lined up. And that'll help me get right in the center dot. So everybody asks, this is Purple Air Erase by Collins. So I'm going to comment on this. This is an air erase marker, meaning that if you leave it exposed to air, it will eventually disappear. So recently somebody was telling me that they wet it to get it off. And you can do that, but it will not wet off easily. It will take a lot of water. So just know that. It's designed for air erase. But you can wet it, but you'll maybe have to wet it a couple times. All right, we got our center mark. I am going to use my pin today, so we'll get this out of here. In case you haven't seen this before, I highly recommend putting the pin first through the center of wherever your space is. And what that does is that leaves a nice visual mark on the back. So I'm kind of holding the fabric so it doesn't, move around. And then I have a little bit of a visual place to put the pin in. Once I get back to the front, I may need to massage it a little bit so that it does actually go through that center hole. There we go. Good enough. All right. So this is a 6-inch square, but the diagonal here is actually about 8 1/4. So when I put this on, this makes 4 rotations at 90 degrees. So I can put a lobe in each of these diagonals and they will fit perfectly in there. If you ever are in doubt, all you have to do is put that on. We'll scoot this up just a little bit. And then you can see right here that this can fit in the space because obviously the foot is going to come inside that line. And so we'll be able to put this design in there. All right, let's get started. So right here, I should be on this line right here as I'm going around. So I'll be looking for that. So we'll pull up that bobbin thread like we always do. Always want that on the top so you can control for that. And we'll get right in there. So I'm going to kind of check my alignment here, make sure I'm... Looks like I did not make my line very straight, so we'll be fudging just slightly. Oh, perfect. So I'm right in the line there. And then this will rotate, and you've got this reference line right here, so you can just line that up right on that stitch line right there. And then you're looking to line this up on your crosshair square. Right there. So at the top, I kind of like to take an extra stitch right there before I start going the other way. And that helps to anchor that bobbin thread so that he will be nice and tight and not drag any thread from the bottom. So we'll get ourselves, again, checking that alignment each time. So I want you to see my hand right here. Notice that these are the speed bump fingers. See how they're off of the ruler? And then these ones are on, right? And then I'm holding kind of the back and the front so that that grip, even though my fingers are not right on it, they are compressing right there. Okay. I had to look and see where I was. I almost went backwards. All right, let's get this last one in here. So for those that don't know, on our circles on quilts, there's a letter A right there, and a letter B right there. And what I'm doing is I'm sewing from A, and I'm coming down and stopping at B, right? So if you haven't seen this template before, these style of templates are so practical. Now right there, I want to make sure that that is a 1/4 inch away, so that when my design is finished that I end at the right spot. So I'm just going to check it really quick and make sure. So it's a little bit far. There's actually a little bit of a gap. So I'm just going to kind of stretch them a little bit. And now I'm lined up right there. So that's going to help me make sure that everybody's going to behave. For those people that haven't seen the tie off, we'll go ahead and do it again. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just follow the existing stitch line and micro stitch about 4 or 5 stitches. If you have a really slippery thread, then you may want to stitch about 5 or 6 in that area. But remember to move the fabric. Don't stitch right in the same place without moving, because you'll get a big knot right there. Okay, so at this point we can pull up our thread. We're going to move our sandwich away, and now we can bring that right down where we left off, and we'll pick up that bobbin thread. So right there you can see that's the bobbin thread. So we'll snip that bobbin, and we'll also snip our top thread. And because we've tacked everything in, I can go ahead and I can snip this all off. There we go. Now, I know that some people use that self-threading needle and they hide that. I'm a little bit lazy, although here on this white it definitely is visible, so it might be worth doing that sometimes. You may decide to do that. There's a lot of examples of that self-threading needle that are available either on my site or a lot of our other educators, so if you ever want to see that, you certainly would have access to that. Okay, so we'll just kind of smush that fabric right there. We are going to stitch right there, so that is going to be hidden really well. All right, so let's get our next one. So the next one that we're going to use is the Spinifex number 8. And again, we can just put him right on the center line. So this is the midline right here where the foot would sit. And if you'll see right there at the top, I'll turn it towards you, the foot can come all the way up into here without exceeding the boundary of the block. So he's going to fit really beautifully right in there. Just visually, I can tell. The reason I'm going to add him in there is I don't think this is enough quilting for this big white space. So I want to put a little bit more in there to create some more visual interest. So that's the choice that I'm making, is that I want a little bit more quilting in there in order to give some character to that area. All right, so let's get our needle seated. Now we're going to end up sewing back to this area many times, so we don't need to tie him off just yet. So I'll kind of start towards you. I can go ahead and use the point with the Spinifex, or I could sew like this, and then this center line would be lined up on the crosshair. For the design that I'm going to do today, I'm going to go points out. So this is a straight line. If you ever want to echo it on this side, this is capable of coming to a point with a straight line. So that just something to note if you ever want to do any echoing like that. So let's go ahead. We'll just line it up and we'll put these in. We're going to put 4 of them so that they'll fill up the square. All right, we'll just scoot these bad boys out of our way. We could trim them, but I don't like to stop in the middle. I'd rather wait till we're done. So let's comment really quickly right here. Sometimes when people use a Spinifex, they feel like the center right there is messy. So that maybe they have lots of different start points for different lobes every time that they make another one. So the thing to do is right now you want to look inside of this little opening and make sure that your needle is actually in the center. Because if you're not quite at the center and then you start the next lobe, you're going to get different start points each time. So it's worth taking just a second to look in there and make sure that you do have it right at the center. All right, so we're lining up right here and we'll just sew around. Right here, you're going to start just a little bit slowly around that area because you're kind of going around the outside curve instead of an inside curve. And then we'll do this last one. Alrighty, let's see if we can get lined up. So if you have trouble visualizing the line on this side, there is also a line on this side that can be used. So right here, I can use this line as a reference as well, just to make sure that everybody's lined up. And remember that the lines from the crosshair don't go home with you. They're going to come off. So if you're a little bit off, who cares? It's okay. All right, so let's tack this all off, and we'll just kind of fill this in so we can make it look full in case we have a chaotic center. Which we don't, right? Because we checked it. But then I'll make it look like a little center of a flower if we just fill it in a little bit. All right, so let's get that bobbin pulled up and we'll cut that. Here I definitely wouldn't bother hiding anything because there's so much stitching right in there. You can definitely get away with a lot right there. All right, let me cut some of these threads because we have loose threads everywhere. Ta-da! Doesn't that look awesome? Okay, we're gonna do one more thing that's kind of fun. So we wanna, like I said, we wanna make this visually interesting. So right here, we have the block split, right? And I'm gonna extend this line right here really quick. Because we need to know where the center is. So let's see if there's any questions real quick. Honey, you got any questions, babe?
I think you're all caught up.
All right, and I think that one's good. So I don't know, I didn't do good centering my space right there. Look at that. But you know what? What we're gonna do next, it'll all quilt out. Nobody will notice. All right, the next one that we're gonna use is we're gonna use this right here. I just have 2 pieces of tape on there, and there's some center marking lines. We may use some of those. I'll kind of show you what we're gonna do with this. So I'm gonna start in the corner because I can hide really easily right there. I can hide the thread. So we'll start right in the corner. So we are gonna end up coming back to this exact spot, so I won't tie it off yet. And I'm gonna try to lay this right in the center, and you can see this is parallel right here. So I'm using also that as a visual. And what I want is I need a 1/4 inch to come right to there. So I'm gonna put the spacing gauge so that I come right into the middle. So there is a lot of white right here, but realize we don't care about that. We just want to be a 1/4 inch away so that the needle will end right there. So you may end up shifting this back a little bit in order to get that. Okay, and same thing, kind of use this as a parallel, but again, you just want that 1/4 inch so that you can get right into the corner. Thank goodness for spacing gauges, right? They're awesome. Oh, perfect. Okay, so let's turn it. This way you guys can get a little better visual. So same thing right here. I'm going to try to keep this parallel, but I want to get in. So I might have to scoot it down just a little bit so I can get in there. So why am I adding this part right here? So I feel like this is a little bit more romantic than without it. So you can really see the difference between this side and this side. And then this is softening the edges, but also filling it in. So this is very regular, the square. And by putting these little curves in there, we're gonna soften that square and add a little bit of sort of romantic detail to the design. It's also gonna kind of accentuate these points because it narrows here and then it widens out. So it's kind of accentuating this design as well. So that's my thought process. All right, let's get this last one on here. Okay, and then we'll do the last, just the last couple. so you can see how we're going. So this is several of the templates now that we've used, and we're able to just get a nice, pretty, romantic fill in here that kind of created this nice motif. And then if I was going to do this for myself and quilt it more, we're going to talk about some other details that you can add in and whether you would ditch it or not, how you would ditch it, in fact. Okay, so right here, we're at this tie-off area. Now, so many people also want to know, what do you ditch and what do you not ditch? For this quilt, this is so skinny that I would not bother putting any quilting in there. If I sewed on each side right here, this essentially is going to lift up and become a powerful frame because this will punch down right along the edge. So for this particular shape, I would ditch this all the way around. In addition, if I ditch right here, it's going to make this little curvature stand out as well because it'll be ditched on this side. See, right now it's kind of up above. So I would go ahead and ditch around. And when I made this, you can see that the little lip right here, the blue is the top, the mountain. So this is the valley right against the white. So it's going to be easy all the way around to ditch on the white, especially with this lighter thread. It's going to hide better in the white than it would on the navy. Now out on this side, the lip is towards the pink, right? So that we have to be in this ditch right here. So I might, go ahead and use the blue if I'm really careful. If I wanted to change colors, I could use the navy, and the navy would hide better out here. But I would ditch both sides of this because I think that would let this be sort of a frame feature for all this center motif that we made. In addition to that, now we have areas that we can fill in with micro quilting. So we could do a fill in here, or we could do a fill in here, something like this. Just even parallel lines. You don't have to free motion it. You could do it with a ruler and then scoot down here, come back up here and do parallel lines like this. And then stitch along the ditch here and parallel lines. And this is something that you could do with your ruler. You don't have to do it free motion. I'm just kind of showing you how you would do it. And if you wanted to travel, you could even put the template back on there and use it to ditch through up the edge to here and then fill in, and then you can put it back on and come down here if you weren't confident in your traveling right there. And then if you filled this in right here with something, you'd get a lot of great texture with this by doing that. Okay, so let's see, we'll tie this off and we'll move on. All right, so how did you like that? Was that useful, helpful, interesting? Let's see, we've got a couple questions. So Crystal Sweeney asked me if the bobbins are 80 weight. So I showed this earlier. This is Deco bobbins. And yes, Deco Bob is an 80 weight. So you can see right there, it says 80 weight. Thank you, April. Good. I'm glad I'm getting some feedback. It's quiet over here. So I wasn't sure if you guys thought it was good or not.
Susan asked, what color do you use when you're ditching?
I rarely change my thread when I am ditching. So was it Susan Digman? Susan Tapp. So she asked, would I change my thread? I really wouldn't. So right here, the thread is in the ditch right here. So it's going to hide pretty well, even on this blue. Let me see if I have a sample of that. Okay, yeah, I do. Perfect. So right there, can you see it? That is blue right there. See that? And then let's see right here. Here's on the navy right there. That's ditching right there on the navy with the blue thread. So I rarely change my thread because you guys remember back when you were learning how to thread your machine, the concept of, oh my gosh, I have to rethread it, or worse, I have to make another bobbin and then rethread it? No way. So I'm going to make it work. And the reason that you can do this even with a dark thread is if you're in the valley, you can hide almost anything, even a white, if you're in the valley. The thing is, you want to go slowly so that you can stay in the ditch. Try not to go super, super fast, because then that's when you start getting, you know, crazy. See right here? It's pretty close to the ditch. It's not perfect, but it hides really well. All right. So let's see. Oh, got lots of questions. They're flying by. Let's see. Let's go back a little bit. Okay. If you fill as you've drawn, do you need to fill elsewhere in the block to balance the quilting? Okay, good question. Very good question. So for me, this was a lot of white. Okay, and I think that this needs fill, because otherwise the design doesn't really show very well. In addition, a lot of times I do double batting, and double batting really helps to emphasize the contrast between the loft if you do any kind of fill. So what I would do, and what I actually do at home, is I would go through and I would mark the areas that I wanted to fill, right? Like with a water soluble or a quilt marker or whatever. And so here, we're gonna ditch right here. So this is gonna be really strong. So what I may do is I may do some micro quilting in here, like this. And you could even maybe echo this like this if you wanted to put another space in there. But by micro filling all of this right here all the way around, this center design is gonna jump out, and then the curve here will also stand out, because this will all be filled right here, right? So this is what I would do if I was at home. This would be my micro quilting plan. So you got fill, open, and ditching around the outside edge. And that's what I look for. And it doesn't mean that all of these have to be the same. Like this would probably be really tight right here, micro quilting, super tight quilting. And then this would be kind of like lazy S's or parallel lines with a little bit of space. So this won't be as tight as this. So you'll get that medium density, high density, and no density quilting, which will really make the design lift up and pop. Okay, so that was Di Werner.
So Bonnie asks, do you use a single hole plate when doing ruler work?
So Bonnie, that is a good question. I don't, mostly because I'm lazy. My machine can do that, but a lot of machines cannot do that. So it really does depend on your machine. So I have also a Bernina. If I was using my Bernina, I would be using a single hole plate. For me, usually that I have so much batting that the quilt is stable enough that the stitching looks fine. And this foot also creates that stability because it kind of compresses around where the needle's going through. So that's another reason why I like the ruler foot for free motion, because it does offer a lot of stability there. But so it depends. That's the answer. You need to do what works for your machine. If you can use a single hole plate, you should totally try it. I think it works great. It definitely supports the quilt better. But if you don't have it, that doesn't mean your quilt can't be amazing and beautiful. Okay, so let's see.
Anne asks, is it ever necessary to ditch before stitching the inside to keep the quilting from distorting the quilt?
So, good question. So actually, if I was actually going to do this quilt, I would ditch all of this right here first to stabilize everything, because this purple, it's different than what's happening out here. It kind of, it echoes this inner box and it has its own presence, whereas this is kind of like a little bordery accent over here. So I would literally ditch this pink right here, and I would ditch these edges, and then usually I would fill in first. So I do ditch a lot first. But the reason why sometimes I might not ditch first is if I don't know if I need to. So if I'm not sure of the design and I'm kind of playing with it as I go, then I may kind of wait on the ditching to see, does it need it? And I'll show you an example of what I mean. So this is another piece that I did, same colorway, and I'll show you the quilting first so we can kind of just explain. This is the different ovals right here. So we have two different ovals. So that's what makes this right here. Then this is the 1-inch circle, and then this is the oval kind of canted a little bit to put this curvy space in here. So it has kind of this center look right here that spins around. So let's see if we can back out so you can maybe see this block a little better, so you can get kind of the whole sense of it. So for me, this right here, this shape was this kind of like shoe fly style with a lot of motion. It's spinning. So that's why we kind of created this narrow to wide, because as motion is bringing it out, it's a little wider. So it kind of creates that sense of rotation, right? And then this is kind of like wind right out here. As the motion is happening, this kind of is like the air waves are being punched out. Now, because we have a lot of quilting right here, I didn't quilt a lot in here. I left this open because I wanted to have some more loft to balance these tighter areas. But I couldn't leave this the same. It needed to have some texture. So this is just sort of like a frame for everything else, the blue right here. Excuse me. Okay, so let's flip it over and let's talk about the whole ditching thing now. I'm afraid to show you, but I'm going to. All right. So because of the way that I did this and how it goes over the line, so the seam is right here, this goes over the line. So if I ditch this right here, I would be cutting this off right there. So I can't ditch right there because that would look wrong. It would look not how it should be. And in addition, so you see this is ditched right here. Notice how this one is not fully ditched right here. This needs to be ditched because if it isn't, it doesn't complete this design. This would look really awkward to me where you have this bleeding into this open space. So I don't know what I would do in this space. I think for me this is a little bit too open, but I'm not sure. Maybe I could just put another arc in there and then I could have this be filled in and then a little bit less of this. And maybe I would fill these right here. So then this would separate these two spaces right there between this, because this is both a lot of openness right there. So maybe that wouldn't be what I wanted. Okay, so was that helpful? Hopefully that answered that question. And we have some more questions?
So when you say in the valley and lip, are you referring to the direction the seam is pressed, or can you clarify?
Yeah, you bet.
What all that means?
Okay, so let's see if we can get you to see that, right? This is on the top. It's pressed this way. This is the mountain right here. And that right there on this lower side is the valley. If you are ditching, you want to try to ditch in the valley whenever you can, because that is the only way to hide it. In addition, imagine if I'm ditching up here on this side, then I have to go through not just 1 or 2 layers, but I have to go through the seam allowance, right? Also, so that's 6 layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When the needle is trying to ditch on the valley, it's quiet. It's like super quiet, and this will hide it. It will kind of, you're putting it sort of down under there, and this little fold will cover it up. But right here, when this is folding over like that, if you're stitching on top of this, it's going to sound like thunk, 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 and you will not have as good a control. Here, I can visually set the spacing gauge right against this lip right here, and I can get exactly right into that valley on this side. The valley's this side, and the mountain is this side. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. Does that mean I don't sometimes stitch on the top? Ugh, I try not to, but it has happened. But you know, like I said, you can fudge it. That's what we do. Okay, any more questions?
Going back a little bit, Sandra asked, your stitching seems so regulated. Do you have your machine slowed down?
Oh, Sandra, what do you think? No, I don't. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't slow yours down. When you're sewing, you have to be able to control your speed. And one way to do that is to make sure that the machine can't go any faster than you want it to. I have 27 years of experience, almost 28 years of sewing experience. I can control it. I can sew slowly, I can sew fast, and I can still regulate the look of the stitches. If you're still in that time where you need a little bit of support and help, it's very useful to set your machine to sort of a medium speed. So like kind of set it to the middle somewhere. And then when you press the gas, you will be at the top speed that the machine now is set for. So that is a very useful technique for you to use if you're having trouble regulating your stitches. The next thing I'm going to tell you here, let's do one more. Since this question came up, I always feel this is a very important question, so we're going to address it right now. So this is just a scrap right here. So my machine is at top speed right now. I adjusted it back so that it's full speed. Okay, I want you to listen to the sound of it when I press the gas all the way. Okay, for me, that sound is so emotionally irritating. I can't tolerate that. I know where the sound should be. This is about where I'm at. Okay, this is the speed that I feel comfortable with, and this is the sound that I feel comfortable with. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to find the sound that works for you. Most people, if they've been quilting even for 1 year, they know what their machine sounds like when they feel comfortable. It has a very rhythmic sound. So what I would recommend if you're at home and you're having trouble regulating your stitches is I want you to slow your machine down to the sound that feels comfortable and doesn't produce anxiety for you. And then you'll be able to control it. Because if you've pieced a bunch of quilts, even if you piece like, say 2 or 3 quilts, I mean, that's a lot of stitches. And you know what you can control when you're piecing? Well, it's the same speed when you're quilting. You can control that same level. Okay, so hopefully that answered that question.
I think the last one we have right now is Cindy asking, can you explain how you tie off?
Sure. Okay, let's do that. I do get a lot of requests for that also. And I will tell you that it's kind of a little bit complicated. It's not hard to do, but there are many steps. So what you may want to do is come back to the video and write down the steps until you have them, memorized for yourself. So if I'm done and I want to tie off, I don't want to continue stitching. Say I'm finished, right? And I don't want to go anywhere else. So what I would do is I would literally stitch back on my existing stitch line. Notice that I am moving my sandwich. I'm not stitching right in the same place. I'm traveling ever so slowly, but you have to move or the stitch knots will stack up on top of each other. If you move, they won't. It's much better to move just a tiny bit. Okay, so we're done. We've tied off. Now we've stitched our stitches in so they're not going to ravel, they're not going to pull out. That's why we micro tack, to close the design and secure the stitches. So now this is the get your bobbin and get everything ready to cut it. Lift up your needle and your foot. This releases the pressure on the thread so the thread can move. So I want you to pull it about 6 inches away. Then you're going to line everything back up where you left off, right where your needle left the fabric is the goal. Because you don't want to put it in a different place or you're going to get kind of a weird look. So I'm looking in through there and lining everything up. If I raise that foot again, I'm going to hold the loop that I made, this loop right here. Now, this is the trickiest part. People think if they pull the loop, it's going to pull the bobbin up. You have to pull both sides to get the loop up. Oh, and of course it won't do it for me, right? There we go. There it is. So now I can cut everything. So let me show you 2 things. On this, one side is connected to the bobbin, and you can tell because I can make it really long. That's the bobbin side right here. This is the bobbin side. So we'll cut that on the quilt side because we're done, right? And then this is the top thread, so we'll cut that as well. Oh, these are the old threads over here. Okay, so here's the bobbin thread, right? This is the bobbin thread. Now watch what happens. If we move this, that bobbin thread is just going to pull away like that. So there's our little tie off. Let's see if you can see it. So you get a little bit of extra stitching right at the end. But typically I wouldn't have blue thread on yellow fabric, and I certainly wouldn't have this just like out in the edge. It would connect to the design, or it would be in the seam or something like that. But this is very secure. A lot of people do it. The reason I like it is I don't have to get underneath the quilt and snip the bobbin thread and then come back up and then snip over here. And, you know, you can still hide those tails if you want to. You can tie a knot and use a self-threading needle. That's another way to do it. So maybe we'll do that on one of our other samples. So let's go ahead. We're going to move to one of the other pieces real quick that we have. Dun, dun.
Is that glider the same size as the grid glider?
Let's see. I would say that it is. Because there's your 20. So I have my ruler on here. This is an 18-inch ruler, and that is the size. So there's your extra 2. And it should be 12 front to back, and it is. So it's exactly the same size as the grid glider. It's perfectly sized. And, you know, in general, we have the smaller one available for smaller machines as well. If you don't have a machine that has this big throat, then we also have the other glider that's a little bit smaller. So that's useful for people that have a little bit of a smaller space. All right, so you guys want to see one more? We'll do one more. So let me get this on here. I just want to make sure that we have batting and backing around all of them. Okay, so let's get back up top so you can see a little better. Okay, now let's talk about this real quick. This piecing is really dynamic. I want something that is going to kind of enhance this piecing and not take away from it. So for me, the quilting wouldn't be the focus like it was with our last one. The last one had that big white space, and it was all about the quilting because the piecing was kind of blah. But this one, this multi-tonal design, this star is the star. And so we want any quilting that we do to make sure that it is going to accentuate the quilting and not take away from this piecing at all. So something that is really cool to do is if you have a shape, let's see if we can grab it real quick. So this is the perfect shape for this right here. So I don't know if you can see that right here, right? This would hit right at this line. This is the correct angles. So we can put this in here, and we can use the pin or not. I mean, we have a pretty strong center mark right there, so we could just go ahead and probably sew around it. And I might do that, especially because if my piecing is a little bit off, this is not as accurate as the crosshair square, so I might not want the pin in there. I might want to be able to fudge it a little bit, right? And then what I would do with this, because we want this to be the star and we have blue thread, is maybe on this side. So let me just draw it really quick. I'll show you what my thought is here. Stitching line disc. All right, so let's see if we can get him to behave. Oh, I might not be able to get that side very easily. Okay, so we want to create some motion with this star. It already has a little bit based on the way that it looks. I would sew the circles on Quilts 21, the whole thing, all 4 pieces, and I would make the points on each of these big lobes. Then I would come back in, I think, with my blue thread, and I would do a 1/4 inch design like this. Okay, and what that does is that puts more texture into this area. And I wouldn't texture this side. I would leave the navy, so you'll have the shape right here, but this will be lofty. Right? So you'll get a compression and you'll get loft, compression, loft, which will make this shape jump out more. It'll give more to this shape. And then what you could even do if you wanted to is you could come like this, and you could maybe put an echo in here if you wanted to. And you might have to fudge that up at the top here to get it, you know, to come up like that. So you could always either fudge that or draw it in or use another template to create this. Right? And then you have a gap, and then maybe you could do something like this. Or just leave it open. So once we get this center area, what are we going to do with this? Because then you have these pieces. The star would be ditched right here, so this would now be its own part. Because of the way my fabric tries to follow. I don't know if you can see it has brush lines like this. What I would do here is I would have this be ditched right here, and then I'm just going to do lines like this. Right? And that emphasizes this shape so that it makes this triangle be the focus, because both of these will be highlighting the triangle right here. Like that. And I have the 3x8 straight ruler, or you can use the 12-inch arc, and this seam line is the reference. So you would be moving out from this seam line. So this would be your straight line to line up your ruler. So like this. Right, so your first one, and you can do a pattern, you could change it, you could do a 1/4 inch and then half, a 1/4 inch, half, whatever you wanted. But then now this little triangle is kind of what's left. So let me show you. I'll stitch this one. I'm going to show you what we want to do on that one. Let me put some of these pieces away. All right. So there is a little bit of a seam right here where these come in. This has got a lot going on right there. So I want to be on this low side with my needle. That way I won't quite have so many layers to go through. All right, so we're gonna have, stuff going on here, and then this will have the shape, but it'll basically be lofty. We won't really be doing anything. It's possible you could come back in and do a 1/4 inch echo right here, which will close this space and actually lift a little bit right here. So you would ditch and maybe do an echo, which will frame the star even more. And that would make this line complete, and it would give a little breathing room between these two spaces. So this space right here is about 4 inches. And what I did is I just took my ruler and I measured it, and this is a 90-degree angle right to the point right there. And I'll just make my dots a little bigger so you can see that. And these are spaced 1 inch apart. And the goal was that the ruler foot would fit right in there. So essentially it would be kind of a 1/4 inch away on either side. So it wouldn't kind of close into that space. So let me grab my spacing gauge real quick, because we want to sew right to those dots essentially. So about right there. So you're not going to get a lot going on here with this first one. Oh, I did not measure that very good. All right, so now we want to come down to there, right to the corner. Oh, we're going to have to sew up just a little bit, I think, because we're not anywhere near the middle there. That's what my goal was, to have the foot seated right in there. So I may have to clean this up a little bit. Bonbon time. Alrighty. So we'll go back and fix that later. That's how it is. All right, so there we go. We're right to that corner. And now each of these dots will have this triangle in there. Right there. And we can do this from the back. We don't have to switch our hands or anything else. We just can look behind and get that lined up right there. Okay, same thing. Let's make sure you guys can see all right. So there's my spacing gauge right there. Touch the ruler to your foot first and then use the spacing gauge, and that'll help make sure that you've got the correct positioning. Alrighty, we'll do this last one. So that's a kind of a point-to-point style right there. And then this right here, this side of the triangle, this fabric is really busy. So there's no way that a lot of fancy quilting is going to show on this side. So it's hardly worth doing a lot here unless you had that double batting that would show. So what I would do something here is maybe I would just, you know, ditch the shape, and then maybe I would just do a triangle echo or something like that. Something simple that isn't a lot of complicated work. But here, these are going to show. And because they're like a little bit offset, they don't go like right in the middle, because this is a 45 with this angle right here. So this will create some movement because it's a little bit of offset. It's a little bit off balance type of thing. So I think that would be great, and that would really put a lot of quilting that would show, because this thread definitely is visible on this blue, and it adds a lot of that texture. All right, so let's see. We had one more. Let me just tie this off real quick. And here, you know, right where I am, I could start ditching and move over to the next one. So this would be your automatic travel line right here. And then you could start doing your point to point here, and then ditch it and go around. So, all right, let's cut that off. Oh, what did I do? I pressed the wrong button. All right, we'll get all of our loose threads out of there. So let's see, we had one more. Do we have time for one more? How are we doing on time?
It's 4:11.
4:11. Okay, you guys still with me? I'm checking in. Let's see what questions we have. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Let's see. All right, so if you got a question, throw it out to Honey and he'll relay it to me, okay? So this is a reject from my Fun and Fancy sampler. I had some leftover fabric and I was trying to do square and a square, and you can tell it did not work. So let's talk about that. Because this didn't work, how can I make it work and make it look more intentional? What I think I would do is I would mark the centers here, and I would actually stitch a spaced box from the corner to corner. And what that'll do is that'll give me a double frame. So I'm gonna ditch it here. So this one we will go ahead and we'll talk about the ditching right here. Since we haven't demoed it, I'll actually do it. I don't like to start in the corner when I'm ditching. And why is that? I think it's much easier and smoother to connect on a straight. When you have a corner, if you have a lot of bulky stitching in the corner, your eye goes right to it. So if there's any problem, people's eyes are naturally drawn to an angle because there is a change of direction. So here we can hide it a lot better. And notice that we're in the valley. So this purple on this side is the mountain, and this is the valley right here. So we'll just put our needle in there, right? And we can use, I'll show you guys, this is my 3x8, my straight ruler. We demoed that last week with cross hatching. Love it. So if you need a straight ruler, it's my favorite size because it fits right into your hand. And then we need our spacing gauge, which I set down, of course, somewhere. Here we go. All right. So because the valley is on this side, I'm going to encourage you to measure this way. I like to hold this way. I won't lie to you. I like to hold this way. This is way more comfortable for me. I'm right-handed, and I usually hold and control the ruler with my left hand, and I control the sandwich with my right hand. That is my most common proposition. So if you're a lefty out there and you've been sewing like this, you might try flipping it around and seeing if you're more comfortable. All right, but I think to measure and have the spacing gauge fit just perfectly up against this seam right there, see how we're going to be much better off on this side? All right, so we'll start sewing. And it's a little bit far away on that side for some reason. That's probably because of my seam. So right here, it's getting a little narrow. I can tell because the needle's closer. So I'm going to make a small adjustment. And I can also use my finger right here as an adjustment as well. Now when you're ditching, You can definitely ditch like this. It's completely easy to do. You want to make sure that you have that spacing gauge right in there, which sometimes means you may have to get your head in there. No, just kidding. Just checking if you were listening. Just put the spacing gauge right up against the little lip right there and check it in a couple of places. And now you're going to trust that your ruler is in position, okay? Just hold it in place. When you go side to side, I believe you should have two hands on the ruler like this, because if you move side to side, that's a less common motion for us most of the time. We pull towards us and we push something away from us, but we tend not to do this kind of a motion. That's pretty uncommon. So if we use two hands when we're going side to side, it's a lot more successful and we have a lot more control. All right, hopefully I'm not messing up, right? Getting right into the corner, so I'm looking right inside there. And then on this side, we'll use our spacing gauge. Who remembers my Fitbit moment? This would be where I would stand up and I would look over my machine at the back there and make sure that my ruler was right in place. And if I see that my needle is off, maybe I can look in there and see it. I would just stop and go ahead and remeasure and make sure that I have everything lined up. Don't just keep sewing off, because that can happen sometimes. So notice that I'm sewing a little bit slower when I'm ditching because I want to have all of that control. I think I need one more stitch right there. There we go. All right. Oh, and now we have to go back to this side. All right. Spacing gauge is happy. So now I'm going to show you real quick. Notice that I can't line up my spacing gauge. What that tells me is probably my needle is not correctly positioned yet. So if you can't line it up, you need to just investigate why rather than just accept that. Okay, that's much better. All right, and we're almost down to the bottom there. One more. So now at this point, we want to make sure that we're connecting up right here with this guy. So I'm going to put my spacing gauge right where I left off stitching, right there. And make sure that I'm going to right back to that exact spot. And then because this is in the valley, we should be able to hide that really easily. Lift up your needle and then press your foot. Hold on to this thread. And you'll be able to get yourself right back in there. All right. Do you guys need to get in a little closer? Let's see if we can see the ditch a little better. Get you in there. All right, so let's trim it off. So right now, this is all the way ditched right here, and then I would just use whatever I needed to get to the center. So I'd mark these center spaces right here. I'll use some white chalk so we can. So I've got this straight line right here. I'm just going to line that up right through the center so that I can get, let's see, where are we? Right here. There we go. It's like I was going the wrong way. That way I can have a visual right here with the chalk. And this will help make sure that everything is nicely spaced. We need these visuals all the time. So I've said it before, but I have sometimes students who come in and they tell me, oh, I want to learn how to use rulers because I don't like to mark things. And in my mind, that boggles my mind because I mark a lot. I mark a very lot. So we'll start right here. So obviously this is going to be that blue thread right here on the pink. So it'll be quite visible, but that's okay. We don't care. We want it to show, we want that frame to be defined. So we're going to make it be defined. So we'll get these out of there. We are coming back to this spot, so we'll just tie it off at the end just one time. And pretty good. I mean, it is going to be a 1/4 inch right around there to get to the corner. That is something I would check, because if if my seam was really wonky, maybe then it was like 1/2 inch on one side and a 1/4 inch on the other side, I might not like that. I might choose a different design if it couldn't be balanced. Let's see, we need one more stitch, I think. There we go. Alrighty. Make sure your speed bump's on the outside. You can tell I've got my hands with my 4 fingers on the outside right here. This is the speed bump right here. Let's give you a little bit more of an angle so you can see what we're doing. Oh, don't get dizzy. I'll try to make you straight. All right. All right, and then we'll get here and we'll tie off. All right, and so right here, I would go ahead and I would stitch down that ditch right on top of the existing stitching, just a few stitches right in line, and then that's how I would tie that off. And it hides pretty well with the straight stitches like that. It's pretty easy to tie those off. So we'll just cut everybody since we're done. And we've completed this. We've stitched over those threads. So they're right there. We stitched over those, so they're definitely secure. All right, so now let's talk about, we've got this space right here. This is a lot of pattern. So it is difficult to make something that will show up in this space, but let me see if I can show you what I have in mind. Okay, so this is the 1 inch circle. So I would go ahead and I'd mark the center line so that I could center the circle. And then I'm going to use the oval and come into the corner and into the 45-degree mark right in the middle, and into the corner and into the 45-degree mark, which will be here, so that it creates this little flower. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And with the blue thread, it should show up, and this will be our last design of the day. I think that because this square is in the center, because it is prominent, even though it's printed, I think that there has to be some visual interest that brings your eye into it. So I think if we just left it like this, or if we just did, like some arc or something like that, people would look in the center and they would say, wait, there's nothing there to draw my eye. So that's something to think about. Sometimes a block maybe looks like it doesn't need anything because it has a printy fabric, but I think for this, there's so much going on out here, your eye would constantly be drawn out to here and have nothing to bring it to the center to move it around. All right, so let's get our little circle. So I'm going to try to make sure that my crosshair square diagonals go right through the corner, and that's how I can make sure that my markings will be centered. So if it is actually a square, as long as these diagonals go through, then that's going to be centered so that the circle will be in the center of the space. All right, and since we do have a 40 weight thread, but when we line up the circle, one of the things that we can do is we can actually sew more than one time around. And what that'll do is that'll put a lot more visual impact in the center, which will help us to define that space. All right, we'll get everybody lined up. So let's go ahead, we'll go around the circle more than one time. And you could even go around 3 times. It's okay, because we want this to have a little bit more of a pop. So by doing that, we can create that visual impact right there. All right, so we'll do something a little crazy. So I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put a little curvy. And then we'll kind of go around a little bit and we'll put another little curvy. And that'll help us put a little bit more visual detail there in the center to kind of fill that in. Now, we want to be sort of on one of these points, either the middle, let's see right here. Okay, so this is that center line. So now we're going to use our arc to get up to the corner. So let's make a mark. I think you guys have seen, I like to use wet erase markers. Okay, so this is this wet erase marker, and what I want to do is I want to make a mark for how I'm going to line this up each time. So that's the 1/4 inch, and I want the needle sort of in line right there. So that's going to help me try to make my design as symmetrical as I can, just by putting that mark on there. And I like this because once this dries, if it brushes against the quilt, that is not going to wipe off on your quilt. So I never recommend a dry erase, always a wet erase marker. All right, so line that up with your needle. There's your 1/4 inch right there. Right into the corner. And then we'll do the same there and right there to the center. Okay, make sure you guys can see. So there's our center line. We'll line that up with the needle and we'll come back into the center. Now, if you use a different arc, something that's deeper, you'll get a little bit larger flower shape. You know, this is kind of a narrower one that we have going on. But if you use a different shape, then you can make it a little deeper. Ooh, went crazy. And we've talked about this before, but like if you wanted to have more definition, you could go ahead and you could sew in, and then you could sew this shape back and forth, and that would give you more thread to lay down. So that would definitely increase that visual. See how the blue here with 3 times is really visible, whereas this isn't? But you could go 1, 2, 3 and end back where you started and proceed with the rest of the design. All right, this will be our last one. And at this point, you know, if you wanted to, you could come in and put some veining in there, or, you know, just take the other oval is deeper and you could come back in and you could make a second oval. So I'll tack it off and just show you what it looks like. So I hope that some of the things that we talked about today will help inspire you and help you make some decisions about how you want to create designs for yourself. It's not that you have to, you know, do mine. You can do yours, do you, but you'll see. And now, of course, there's a lot of markings here, but if these markings were gone, that's going to look a lot prettier without all those markings in there. And so, you know, then maybe we'll do, you know, something curvy here, a little, you know, curve with the oval, which will sort of echo the shape and fill in this space nicely. So, and then I would think about, you know, the whole block, how do I want to balance? If this has a lot of quilting, then maybe I have something a little less here and then a little more here, and that will help to balance it off. So real quick, I'm going to check in with Honey and see if we have any questions, and then
All good.
okay. So you guys, thanks for sticking with me. I hope you felt that that was useful and practical. And, you know, there is no rule. Ultimately, the last tip that I'm going to give you is if you put your quilt on your design wall and you wait for it to speak to you, it's not going to. It's inanimate. Okay, you may get it inspired, but the thing that I find most inspiring is put something on your quilt. Anything, a straight line, a curvy line, a circle, a triangle, something. Because once you have something on there, you either like it or you don't. And if you don't like it, then you know I want to go a different direction. And if you like it, then you just keep going in that direction that it's leading you. But it's hard to do that when you have nothing on there. So I always encourage somebody, and if you didn't like it, number one, you don't have to keep it, but you can. And I would tell you that a lot of times you'll be surprised that it probably is fine once you get all the other quilting in there. But, you know, just do it a couple more times and then go some other direction. Don't rip it out. Just keep going. Put something else in there that you like better. So anyway, hope that you found the designing interesting. I hope that you found the thread information useful. And we went over a lot of ditching concepts. And then we definitely want to share our fun and fancy. So if you liked our video today, please share it with your friends, your quilty friends. And our fun and fancy is available $75 with the template set. And it has lots and lots of designs, including a patchwork connection for how you might want to quilt your blocks. And then if you want to do some of the blocks that are actually in there, we also have our fun and fancy quilt sampler, which is this quilt pattern right here. And that is available with this awesome 7-inch adjustable locking ruler. And that uses the Westerly locking ruler system to make all of those. So those are also available. All right. Have a wonderful day. Happy Sunday. Have a good week. Bye, guys. Thank you.